everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of the History Hotline. I am your host, Deanna Lincook, and I am honoured to have a guest with me here today. I am honestly so happy, so thankful, and so blessed to be friends with someone as wonderful as this person. I have been friends with her for 7 years now. She's like, you know, that person where you like read a really good book and you need to discuss it with them, but you need them to have read the book. It will be this person. She will have read that book, I'm telling you. So I'm introducing to you all a graduate in English literature from the University of Birmingham and my great friend Orisha Blissett French. Woo! I feel like I wish.
Hello.
Welcome to the History Hotline. So primarily, you know, Orisha's degree is obviously what qualifies her to be speaking on such wonderful topics, and generally like the depth and breadth of her reading, but also her wonderful page and space that she's kind of created on Instagram called the Readers Collection, which is a space to kind of, using her words, to heal through reading. It's just a great space. It has loads of like book recommendations and collections of books that you could read together on certain themes or topics or different feelings or moods you might be having. She also makes an amazing reel. And if you know me, I love my reels. If you follow us on Instagram, but Orisha's reels put mine to shame. I learned from her. So welcome in Orisha to the stage. Welcome, Orisha. We're going to be talking. I didn't even say what we're going to be talking about today. I'm just so gassed about you. The theme of today, as you know, the title, we're looking at African American literature more generally, because it is still Black History Month in America, and you know I wanted to talk about this stuff. I wanted to talk about America a little bit more and how it kind of intersects with Britain. We might not speak about Britain so much today, but that's okay, because, you know, it's America's time to shine. We'll give them February. So, Orisha, welcome. Thank you for coming. I feel like we should start by you telling us about the Readers Collection and why you started it and what it is all about.
Okay, cool. Well, first of all, you're making me blush, so thank you just for gassing me up a little bit too much.
Anytime.
I love it. So the Readers Collection, and I think in terms of my love for literature, that starts from the womb, because my mom just grew us up with the depth and breadth of literature. You know, she was reading it from when we were young, and so that's what I grew up with, that culture of loving books. And so in terms of just my love for literature, that's just been a thing I've always had. But in terms of the transformative element of literature that really began, honestly, when I really think about it, it began when I started reading the Bible. Wow. Because that was the first book that I'd ever not read. Yeah. Like in depth. Okay. Like all the other books I've read, I could tell you about it, could give you a summary, could give you an analysis, but the Bible was the only one that I was like, I have all these opinions, but they're not based on knowledge at all. Wow. And so when I started reading the Bible, I literally approached it like I would any other book. Because I literally you don't read the Bible
like that, do you? It's not. It's you take a verse, you take a chapter, you take a story to get a message out of context sometimes. But no, you're onto something there. Go on,
exactly.
Let me not cut you, sorry.
And so when I began reading the Bible, I was like, you know what, God, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to do what I've always done. And so in literature, you know, you're not just looking at the story you see on the page, you're looking at the story of the author, the context in which it was written, the context of the, reputation and reception that it had, and all this kind of stuff, you know, the psychological context, the feminist analysis, all these kinds of things. And so literally that's how I approached the Bible. And it was only until then that I really started to experience healing in my life. Wow. And so from that point, that was like the springboard to really see how other books could transform my thinking and transform the way, you know, I viewed things, whether it was, you know, personal experiences or just experiences of people around me, of just different things. And because of my depth and, you know, breadth of knowledge, having gone to uni and read like thousands of books, it felt like, I was like, you know what, like, I want to make this accessible to other people. Like, I don't want to be the only one experiencing like this party of reading, you know what I mean? And so having done English literature at uni, I'd always get those questions like, oh, like, how did you do it? Like, oh, I've never finished a book in years. And like, every time my heart would stop, because I'd be like, how could you do that? You know what I mean? Really tearing my heart apart here. So the Readers Collection came about by me experiencing the Bible and its, you know, transformative, incredible healing power, but also, you know, with going to uni and just having a range of books that I feel like this would help someone, whether it's fiction, non-fiction. And so the Readers Collection, I just wanted to make it, you know, relatable, because not everyone wants to read a book because they want to be smart. Sometimes people want to read a book because they're struggling with their mental health, you know, or some people want to read a book because they're like, I want my voice to be heard and I don't know how to access that. Or some people just want to read because they're like, I haven't read in years and I need to have something to read to make myself feel good, you know. So it was all those kind of things that I wanted to kind of bring together. And so that's kind of how the Readers Collection was birthed, because I want it to be the Readers Collection, not my collection, but belonging to the people, if that makes sense.
It's great. No, it makes perfect sense, definitely. And, you know, you can check out Orisha's page, as I said, at the Readers Collection on Instagram, because I think that's exactly what I feel when I'm on that page and I see a post from you where we're thinking about, you know, certain theme or trying to overcome a trauma or even overcoming a prejudice or a view you might have of a certain group of people or a situation historically or otherwise. And I needed you on this podcast because that page is great. And if you're listening right now and you haven't already gone to look at it, like, what are you waiting for? You can do both. You can listen and scroll, trust me. Right, so just as we ease ourselves in to literature today and thinking about African American literature, and the reason why Orisha is kind of the perfect person is because, well, I'm going to tell you her dissertation title. We're going to get into it later, but it was fantastic. It was Wanted, Black Outlaw Women in 20th and 21st Century African American Literature and Music. And we might have to get her back on to talk about the music because, well, we can talk about it today, but maybe not in the depth of the literature because it's a literature episode. Nah. But I thought before we launch into that and the kind of meat that's going to give us, you know, let's do a little quick fire round of your favorite books, your favorite authors, least, maybe historical time periods, just to see the kind of reader you are. Because one thing about reading, and when you say you do English lit at uni, I think a lot of people always assume that you've read all the classics, the Dickens, the Austens, the Brontes, Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Milton, and it's just not the case. Like, I ran away from those modules like they were on fire. I was gone. I went for everything that opposed that.
But
so I kind of want to let the audience know what kind of reader you are, the kind of books you read, the kind of books you don't read, because as we know, all readers are different, and there is literally a book out there for everyone. And if you don't get that by the end of this podcast, we failed. But I don't want to
literally.
I don't fail things. So let's go. Quick fire round, Orisha. No explanation, just answers. And I'm not going to answer because it's not about me. So, number one, who is your favourite author?
Maya Angelou.
What is your favourite book?
William Golding's Lord of the Flies.
Okay. Least favourite book?
Anything by Jane Austen.
I love that. What is your favourite literary time period?
20th century.
Who's your favourite character in a book?
You really caught me with that one. You really, really got me with that one. So, Boxer in Animal Farm.
Oh, yes. Yes. If you could meet any author, dead or alive, who would you meet?
Maya Angelou.
Love that. And what is a book you've been meaning to read but you haven't got round to it?
The Colour Purple.
Oh, yeah. Alice Walker. Love that. Your favourite historical time period to learn about?
I would say 1970s. 1970s, yeah.
Okay, I like that. And your favourite historical figure, person, politician, you know, freedom fighter, activist in history, anyone?
There's actually so many.
Hold on. Okay, go
Maya
for...
Angelou.
Yeah, you can't have Maya anymore now. We've had enough of that. I'm joking.
Okay.
Pick someone in African American history, just because that's the topic of the day.
Cool. African American history, Angela Davis.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm sensing a theme, sensing a black feminist theme here. I like that. Okay, and a historical time period that you would like to know more about?
What popped into my head was like 1920s to 1940s.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like, I know a bit, but more.
What are you reading currently?
Wow, that's a good question. So I'm reading, I literally started it like earlier this week, and it's called Thoughts and Feelings.
Okay.
And it's basically a book all about, it's branded as a self-help book, but it's a book about mental health.
Okay.
And in there is like practical kind of ways that both therapists and people can use.
Love that.
So kind of articulate the fact that this is not just a book for quote unquote ordinary people, but it's a book that therapists can use on themselves, therapists can use on their clients. So it's like the people's book for mental health, if you know what I mean.
I like
So
that. I feel like your range of reading is wide. Like you've literally gone from the Bible to like some hard-hitting feminist texts to Animal Farm, and then like self-help books about like psychology and therapy and helping people. I love that. You know, why narrow yourself in? And I feel like this is why the Readers Collection is just so great, because you're not just getting one type of book. If I was to recommend books, all you're going to get is history. And the occasional historical fiction, because that's all I read. I love that you've got that variety. Variety is the spice of life. So, since we're talking about African American literature, I wanted us to firstly think about kind of representations of Blackness. And I know that sounds like a lot, and to all of you in the audience, Blackness not necessarily meaning, you know, anything specific. I'm genuinely and deliberately using that term very vaguely. We had an episode about race being a social construct. Might be good to listen back to that, because Black is a term that we have slapped onto people in different societies at different times, and it's always kind of changing the parameters of Blackness, who can be Black, who identifies as Black, who doesn't, and what that means in any specific society. So take that as vaguely as you want, Orisha and audience. But yeah, I'm thinking about representations of Blackness in African American literature, whether that be positive or negative. Kind of what jumps out at you? What are you thinking about text wise?
Well, I think one of the first ones is a non-fiction text, and I'll explain why in a sec. And it's called Sisters of the Yam, Black Women and Self-Recovery, and it's by Bell Hooks, and she's just one of my favourite academics, authors / whatever of all time. So the reason why that stands out so much as a portrayal of Blackness is because there's, you know, in whether it's media, films, or even literature sometimes, on social media as well, might I add, a stereotype of Black women being strong, you know, the strong Black woman, the strong Black woman. And so, you know, there's no wonder that there's such a stigma in, you know, mental health for Black women still. And so I think just by this book existing, the fact that there is because basically what it's about is just recovering from the trauma of racism in different contexts, just different trauma that Black women go through specifically. And so the reason why I think this stands out as a portrayal of Blackness is that it shows that, you know, there's specific things that Black women go through, and we do need healing, that we're not strong all the time, and we don't have to be strong all the time. And that's not a, you know, a realistic or a fair expectation to place. And so I think to someone, you know, who's a Black woman, they might look at it and think, oh, okay, someone gets it, you know, but then someone who's not Black, exactly, I feel seen, right? But then to someone who's either not Black or not a Black woman, they might look at it and go, oh, wow, there's actually recovering that a Black woman actually needs. You know what I mean? So I think that's you know, and so I think it's a positive portrayal of Blackness because it's a realistic one. You know, I
like that.
So that's
we're not asking to be painted as perfect, because we're not. And I think that's definitely a great point. It's a realistic representation. I'm in complete agreement with you. Realistic is fair, and what more can you want with that? Especially when it's, you know, challenging stereotypes that are actually really damaging to Black women. And to Black 100%. Like families and Black communities, because if women are expected to be this pillar of strength in all times, situations, circumstances, you know, when they're not, what does that mean for the rest of the community, for the family, for the home? What does that mean for society? No, I love that. Should we go on to maybe a more negative portrayal of quote unquote Blackness?
Let's go.
Fiction or non-fiction? Either way, I feel like I'm like quizzing you. Like, come on, tell me all the literature. Give it to me.
I love it. We'll go with positive first in fiction.
Okay.
So positive in fiction, I definitely say Ralph Ellison, The Black Ball, short story. And it explores so much and so many different things. But one thing that just stood out to me was the relationship between the father and his son. He's very I don't want to like reveal too much, but just in there conversation, the father's very honest with his son about the reality of racism, but also about the reality of, and I guess what he does is gives his son permission to just be, you know what I mean? To not adhere to a certain, identity or a certain way.
Yeah.
And it will make sense, once you read the book. But his son is very young as well, so it just shows that positive portrayal of Black fatherhood, which is something that you don't, which I think you don't see enough of.
I agree.
In any space, and so I would definitely say that for positive. For negative, I would say Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah.
You see.
Is it a kettle of? No, you've opened a can of worms.
Kettle of worms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I was quite quiet with Ralph Ellison because it's one of them books that, if you had asked me what's that one book you really want to read but haven't had a chance to yet, that is my book, Ralph Ellison's, like anything Ralph Ellison. And I need to read more James Baldwin. They're my two books I just need to get into.
I love him.
Everything I've read of James Baldwin, I have been obsessed with, like read multiple times, but it's just one of them where I need to go and do some more book purchasing, but also have a long list of books that I haven't actually read, so I can't actually purchase more books. Robinson Crusoe.
Where do we begin? Well, let's start with the fact that, the book isn't explicit in its, usage of blackness or black person, etc., etc. But the way otherhood is portrayed, it's very savage, very barbaric, very needs a white savior, needs some kind of fixing. So the way blackness is portrayed in that is pretty uncomfortable.
Okay, I like that word.
Yeah.
And I think the othering idea as, as a concept, as something that when I first, I think it was first year, looking at like theory, and we were looking at Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness, which I guess we will have to come on to soon. But we were looking at othering, and I had never heard of the term othering or to be othered. And I've heard it in a feminist context as well, but it's this idea that, not being what's quote unquote normal. And in this case, it tends to be whiteness being the norm and anything other being othered, i.e. blackness. It's why black and Asian and anyone non-white was called black in the 70s. Political blackness being a thing is a form of othering. So I definitely think that's an important point. And contrasting that to Bell Hooks, who is kind of challenging a stereotype that is kind of fixed with black women, and then you've got Ralph Ellison that is also challenging the stereotype with black men and fatherhood, and how men deal with kind of racism in that context. Then you have a text like Robinson Crusoe that obviously is written at a completely different time but doesn't challenge anything. It upholds racial tropes and stereotypes and others, essentially.
Literally. I think what it does do is reflects the mentalities and anxieties of the time in which it was written. And
absolutely,
obviously that's helpful in terms of a literary analysis and perspective, but it doesn't make it any less uncomfortable, because
definitely
you read it, and even though it's like I said, it's not overt in its racist tropes, it's overt enough for you to be like, oh, this is a bit it's quite, and same with Heart of Darkness as well. It's that's more overt. Let me just stop there.
I know I kind of want to talk about Heart of Darkness, but also
no.
I don't want to do it just yet. Like, it's a conversation that needs to be had, and if you've read the book you'll know exactly why. If you haven't, you'll find out in a few minutes, or maybe we'll find out, maybe we won't get there. You listed, obviously we're talking about African American literature, and I think that's something that I think British schools cover that quite well. Actually, no, let me not lie. Not African American literature, American literature that panders or touches on or slightly nudges the issue of race without necessarily explicitly analysing it, and using that to open up conversations about race in schools, as opposed to using, say, texts by Black British authors or British texts that think about blackness in negative or positive ways. I think everyone listening here, if you've gone through the British education system, you've read either To Kill a Mockingbird or Of Mice and Men. And maybe you've even read, like, I don't know, Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer as well. Maybe, I don't know, do you want to speak about maybe why why that is, why we have to go through these, why are they our introduction to, like, I don't think I had a conversation in the classroom about race until I read To Kill a Mockingbird, and then we were kind of talking about America in the South and racism, and I was like, but here.
It's interesting because I think I benefited from having, you know, those talks at home. My mum's very big on,
Absolutely,
you know, knowing your history. So going to school, it was like, it was nothing new for me. However, the fact that these kind of discussions were only introductory when you would go to, you know, because these cities in the UK, you know, most of them, like London, Birmingham, etc., they are multicultural, you know, and so it isn't nice just having those introductory talks about racism and it not be, you know, including your region, which you know you've experienced some form of either racism or microaggressions or something that you're like, okay, is someone going to give a voice to this, you know? So I understand the kind of discomfort that comes with the, oh, why is it just America? Because there's that, you know, usual thing, oh, when we are not as bad as America, oh, the racism over there is different, you know, we didn't experience it, we didn't, you know, which historically, as you know, as the, you know, expert historian, is
thank you.
Literally, yes, I gotta gas you up, you gas me up, I gotta gas you up. So, you know, that's not true. There was heavy racism in the UK, and some of it was similar to America, and some of it was different and had different nuances and stuff. And so that's something that I only, that obviously I was taught at home, but was also been able to study in depth when I got to university. And I think university is too late. I think it does need to start earlier, because you know, you want to drill into the minds of children and into the minds of teenagers of the realities of the world, and with the hope to change it.
Definitely,
you know,
I agree.
And so the reasons why behind, you know, those kind of things, I couldn't even tell you. All I could say was that it's disappointing. I feel myself going on to like a whole rant. I think it's just disappointing because of there's such nuances in history in the UK, in Black British history in the UK, and the fact that, you know, if we go to, you know, different, you know, British people, it doesn't have to be Black, but different British people, name a Black British historical figure. You know, or name a Black figure, they would most likely talk about someone who's African American, you know.
Definitely.
And so I think we've done in the British education system, there's a big injustice, you know, with that. Yeah, I think it's just a disappointment if I was to comment on that.
I agree. Couldn't have put it better myself, to be honest. And as I mean, if you've listened to any of the other episodes in this podcast, you'll know that it's something I comment on a lot, but more obviously in the context of history, just because I think the way history is taught in this country is absolutely appalling. I think the curriculum needs drastic reform. And I'm happy that there are people out there that are doing that work and kind of adding to this. And I always hope this podcast kind of, by people listening and understanding and knowing the different histories that have been left out and how damaging that is, they will also then kind of pick up that torch to potentially change that for the future, or to teach their kids. I think as well, like what you mentioned about we're living in multicultural cities, and obviously, you know, you said London, Birmingham, and other big cities, Manchester, Liverpool, you know, they're diverse populations, and I don't see how anyone can at this point justify there not being a need for a diverse curriculum that matches these populations.
I agree.
I don't understand, well, I do understand the pushback, but, you know, the British historically as an empire colonized a majority of the world, and now that majority of the world is living in this country through no fault of their own. But when you decimate people's home countries and you force them to be economically reliant on you, this is exactly what happens, and now they don't want to deal with the consequences of that, and it's extremely problematic to me. But that is just that's a whole nother talk for another day. I feel like we've already strayed too far away from the books.
It is.
It definitely is. But I think while we're here speaking about the British Empire, it's the perfect time for Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness.
Honestly, must we go on this book?
Context for anyone that hasn't read it. I wouldn't even go and say go and read it. Don't do that. Don't waste your time. Don't hurt yourself. It's a book that is not to be read, it's to be endured. But some people might like it, because if you're into that kind of thing where Black people are depicted as savages, uncivilized, and in need of a white savior, then go ahead, that's for you.
Go ahead.
But essentially, Joseph Conrad has written this book in, I think, the late 1800s, about 1899. I think it's published around 1900, 1901. And it's basically talking about the area that was then / now called Congo, as the heart of darkness. Listen to the word darkness. He's referring to Africa as being dark. That alone, you can write an essay about the title. But Orisha, I feel like, as the English expert, do you want to just go into how the negative portrayals of Blackness, Black people are? I remember we're now thinking about this in a British context, being the British at this point are literally carving up Africa. They've drawn a map, and now they are drawing lines on that map to divide up countries where people with different religions, cultures, ethnicities all live, and now have to either mix, to be split, to be partitioned, separated, and it's just a mess because, it's just a mess. So, Orisha, before I just, go on a rant about the British Empire in Africa. Just tell us about that representation, that portrayal.
To give it context in terms of the time in which it was written, history up until that point was written by white historians, any kind of history, including what they would call Black history. And so it was no surprise that white historians were fascinated with the concept, and I deliberately use that word, concept of Africa. Africa as a whole, not as a continent rich full of cultures and diversities, but no, as a whole thing, for no better word, a clump of people.
Absolutely.
And so the history that was written about Black people was very reductive, very negative, very they would use like reductive words like exotic and uncivilized and all these kinds of words. Savage. And so that's what's reflected. Those are the kinds of, phrases you will read in Heart of Darkness. It's a book that has like an observatory vibe to it. And calls Africa, again, the whole of Africa, basically. Not, as I said before, a diverse continent, the dark continent and all this kind of stuff. Honestly, I can't even, it's just so hard to talk about because it's just so horrible. It's so horrible to read.
It's hard to, I feel like if you can get how hard it is to talk about, it's like even harder to read. And I remember going into that seminar, I was in first year, and I really did try and make a good impression in first year, did all my reading on time, I had things to say in seminars, but I got to that seminar and I was just kind of praying that I wasn't the only one that didn't read the whole thing, because I physically couldn't get through it. And it wasn't even a thing of like I ran out of time. Like I would sit with that book and I just couldn't read it. Like it just, every kind of word, every phrase, every sentence would just shock you. And even my seminar leader, he'd said at the time that in rereading it for the preparation for that seminar, he hadn't reread it properly. He said he couldn't. It's just one of those books. I feel like I'm making people want to read it, but try and find a PDF for free. Don't pay for it.
No, don't fund that. Don't fund that at all. Like, I think what I found, equally as disturbing as the text itself, is that we're reading it from a place of retrospect and from a place of analysis and look how terrible this ideology is. But at that time in which it was written, it was an accepted piece of text. It was something that was the usual. It's a reflection of its time, and so that's what I find disturbing. So
well, it was texts like that were kind of giving the okay to all those people that were literally at that time carving up Africa as a continent and colonizing it in a variety of forms. I think we're going to leave Joseph Conrad and that text there. I don't want to think about him anymore. This is a bit of a strange question, and I'm thinking of it because I kind of want to think about British literature, not necessarily Black British, but British literature, and just thinking, kind of following on from the last episode, for anyone that listened, about Ira Aldridge, who was the first Shakespearean actor, the first Black Shakespearean actor to perform in Europe. He was obviously casted as Othello, For obvious reasons, Othello being a Moor, who would have been from the region of North Africa, which by today's standards, they probably wouldn't be defined as black, but those days, as I said, anyone that wasn't white is othered as black. And so, yeah, Ira Aldridge plays these roles, but then he also started stepping into other roles, like he plays Aaron in Titus Andronicus, who would have been white. He plays Shylock, the Jew, in Merchant of Venice. And he goes on to kind of take these roles. Listen to that episode if you want to know more about that. It's not what we're going to speak about. But thinking about Shakespeare, I think we studied Shakespeare every single year of secondary school. I studied it every year of uni. It was always compulsory. I think in the third year, actually, I picked it because at that point I thought, I know so much Shakespeare, I could probably do well in this. So let me just pick it. We're here now. Maybe to think about blackness in Shakespeare. I didn't put this on the list, by the way, of our prep notes for the audience. So I'm really putting Orisha on the spot. And okay. I have a few points to add as well. But like, I don't know, just because it's such a kind of a text that we all have to read, I just wondered if you had any kind of comments about that.
Yeah, no, I do. I can talk for England, so this is great for me. So Shakespeare in general, I love Shakespeare. I think I absolutely love Shakespeare. The sonnets, the plays, get me there, like all of it. I see why people find it boring and all that kind of stuff, but I just think the language is so beautiful, and just the depth of the different plays that I've been able to study and stuff. I just think it's great. In terms of Othello, I wouldn't say that I'm like uncomfortable with the way blackness is portrayed. And the reason why I say that is because Othello, just as so many other characters in the Shakespearean plays, is complex. So if I appreciate anything about Othello and Othello's character, is the complexity of his character, you know? Because, for example, Macbeth, all of them characters, have something wrong with them. Like, ain't no right character in Macbeth, you know?
Nope.
and it's a complete tragedy, you know, and it's reflected. And I think Othello's the same. I think that there is a fascination with the fact that there's a black character in the Shakespearean play, and I don't feel like there should be. Everyone's just so fascinated, and I'm like, honestly, if you just read Shakespeare, it's not that deep. Like, this is a usual thing. Yeah. So the fact that there happens to be, quote unquote, a black character in Shakespeare, and you rarely see that, I'm just like, it's really not that deep, because of for me anyway, the quality of his writing, his literature. I think it's just reflected in Othello as well. And so for me, I don't get the hype in that way. I used to, but then as you just continue to read Shakespeare, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. He's gonna die, she's gonna die, everyone's gonna die, so I don't expect anything different. So
wow, there we go. Whistle stop tour of Shakespeare and blackness. Honestly, I completely agree. Especially, like, you know, the amount of Shakespeare I've read. And I say read. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's about time that we swing back across the pond to the United States, and we think about your dissertation, because honestly, the fact you wrote this dissertation, and I remember you were like obviously doing your research in third year, and I was doing similar essays, not for my dissertation because I did a history dissertation, but I was kind of thinking about black feminism and womanism and Africana feminism, just different kinds of feminism. I had a module that literally looked at different kinds of feminism every week. Nice. It was great. We went like through countries, religions, cultures. One of the best modules I've ever done. But Orisha's dissertation is called Wanted: Black Outlaw Women in 20th and 21st Century African American Literature and Music. And we'll primarily focus on the literature, but, you know, talk about the music if you so wish. But yeah, please can you just tell us about that? You're thinking about black outlaw women, you know, what does that mean? And then I guess some of the texts maybe that you were able to bring in and think about, and I guess because we're thinking about blackness in literature, how does it all tie in? You know, the floor is yours.
Oh, this is beautiful. So where does it all begin? Well, it begins with Toni Morrison's Sula, her book, right? And it was one of the books that was on one of my modules. Yeah. And the module was about African American literature. And so this was just like my zone. I was like, yes, finally, my element, right? And so, I remember reading this, and I always love to read the foreword to just see what they have to say before I start. And she literally says in her foreword, just towards the end, she says, outlaw women are fascinating. And then she goes on to say, not always for their behavior, but because historically women are seen as naturally disruptive and their status is an illegal one from birth if it is not under the rule of men. And so, you know, in her forward, she talks about kind of just her standpoint for writing the book and just the context of the time, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But when I read that part, for me, that seemed a little bit displaced from the rest of what she was saying, and that's the reason why it stuck out to me. Yeah. Because I just fixated on the outlaw women. And so from there, I was like, this is something I want to explore, because obviously it's a forward, so she doesn't go into much detail.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I need to explore this, because I wanted to really define and theorize what a Black outlaw woman is/was.
Yeah.
And I wanted to explore, what does it mean to be a Black outlaw woman? Like, what does it actually mean in society, in a social context, economic context, a literary context? I brought in music as well, so in a music context and stuff. And so I really wanted to explore like the nuances and what it means to be an outlaw woman, because when you think of the word outlaw, you do think of like the Wild Wild West, the posters, wanted everywhere,
someone,
runaway someone, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so I really wanted to dig deep and to explore the negative kind of ideas attached to an outlaw and how I could spin it and make it positive. Not because I just wanted to make it positive, but to really shed light on how it's positive, if that makes sense. And so I deliberately picked women who went against the grain, whatever grain that was, you know. So the reason why, so on the literary side, I chose Octavia Butler.
Yeah.
Why? Because she's a woman writing sci-fi, like science fiction. Like, that's just alone, forget that she's Black. Honestly, like, it's just so exciting for me, because I'm like, you are a woman writing in a male-dominated industry, like male-dominated genre, and you're just there and you're slaying it. Absolutely slaying it. And then as a Black woman on top of that, and the content of her stories, it's not just the typical what you would expect, like, oh yeah, female protagonist, she's great, she's liberated. No, like the characters like that Butler created in her stories are deep, are complex. Some of them are not even like fully human, so she adds even another depth to it, another layer, you know. And obviously there can be like sensitivity towards Blackness and making them other, but like, oh my gosh, they're not human, therefore it's racist. And it's like, actually, that's not always the case. And so Butler even challenges that by making her female protagonist like a vampire, for example, you know what I mean? So she really goes against the grain, not just, you know, as you know, within her characters who do go against the grain in whatever societies, as well as herself, literally. So I was like, I have to explore this, you know. So that was really exciting for me. And then Maya Angelou, like, how could I leave this woman out of my writing? Like, I love her to bits, like, honestly. And so what I focused on, though, was her poetry. You know, her poetry about women and about Black women in particular. And obviously one that I had to focus on was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. But I also wanted to focus on Phenomenal Woman, because what she does is she really celebrates womanhood in all of its glory. Because you'll see in some feminist, quote unquote, feminist texts, they want to paint womanhood as, you know, really feminine and really like, oh, this is all glitz and glam. But Angelou does it in such a way that's so like real. She even brings in like, you know, she talks about like the figure of a woman and just the grace of a woman. So even just the different aspects of womanhood that, you know, is not always talked about, you know what I mean? And definitely. So I had to bring her in. Like, there was just like, no, I could not bring her in. But then also I focused on some like non-fiction texts. So for example, some speeches that Angela Davis did. And so obviously there were speeches, but I looked at the written word of that. And just like her as a woman existing within liberation movements at that time alone was a statement, you know. And for her to literally risk her life to say what she said, that is a woman that I'm like, claps to you, honestly. Claps to you.
And also like, sorry, as a panther, being so
Mm-hmm.
militant and challenging
Yep.
that kind of, as you said, the portrayal of women being so like flowery and
Yep.
feminine, which obviously, you know, combat in all black, in the Panther, like the images I'm seeing in my head of Angela Davis are just
Mm-hmm.
completely challenging what you've kind of argued that quote unquote feminists have argued that women should be like, or not even not feminists, society has argued that
Mm-hmm.
women should be like. Yeah.
You know, I love the fact that you use the word militant,
Mm.
because exactly that. Like when you think of Angela Davis, you think of a no nonsense kind of woman, you
Yeah.
know, and the fact that she literally risked her life for the cause. And in just in terms of, if you do like read her speeches, she's very bold in what she says. She's not
Yeah.
like, dude, she's like, we need to, sorry,
Yeah.
everyone needs to
We are
change.
doing.
We are doing this because Ali are problematic. So someone
Yeah.
needs to change, you know? And so I love that, not because of the aggression, because I know sometimes in feminism, it's like, in order to be great, you have to be an aggressive woman, which I don't necessarily agree with, because
Yeah.
that's another discussion. But
Especially when you
I
add the
just,
racial layer of
yeah,
black
it's
women
just a lot.
aggressive. No.
It's
Cancel
just a
that.
big no, a big
Yeah.
no. You know what I mean? But what I really wanted to kind of explore with Angela Davis is just the political stance she took, but also just different stances she took as a woman, and proudly
Definitely.
so. She was
Yeah.
unapologetically a woman, unapologetically black. And so I really wanted to explore that in depth,
Yeah.
that went deeper than, oh, she was a black woman, therefore it was political. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted
I
to
agree.
really look at her as a woman, but also as a person living in that time and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, with the Black outlaw woman, I wanted to kind of theorize it as positive, like this is
Yeah.
a great thing to do. And it's not
Definitely.
necessarily disruptive as a way of harming someone else,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a way of harming the status quo and
And challenging that.
stereotypes,
Yeah.
and challenging that.
What's wrong in
Exactly.
society to make it better. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I've said it before, but when we think about Black liberation, we don't think about women enough.
Yeah.
Black women have been erased from these narratives. I think Black people
Yep.
overall have been erased from, you know, British history when they're in that context, or American history in that context. Women are erased, and the fact that
Yep.
you've brought to light so many exceptional Black women, Black outlaw women that are going against the grain, as you said, yeah, I just feel like it just is just so like wonderful that you've kind of done that work and that research. And
Okay.
I am sure that it was like, you know, when you write something and it kind of feeds you, even though
Yeah.
you're giving to this page,
Yeah.
giving to this work,
Yeah.
but you're also being fed. I feel
Yeah.
like I did my master dissertation on Caribbean women, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt exactly that way of like I was being fed as well as
Yeah.
giving a little bit of myself as a Black woman kind of into
Yeah.
my work. Since we're here, and I'm curious, I kind of want to know about the music. I want to know,
Oh,
give me like, I don't know, one or two of your favorite musical people, concepts, albums, songs that you referenced and how they fit.
I had to bring in Nina Simone,
Yeah.
like absolute icon in everything, in music, in songwriting, in as a woman. She
Yeah.
was bold. She was a no nonsense kind of woman, you
Yeah.
know. And so, a child prodigy growing up, obviously in segregated, racist America,
Yeah.
challenging the grain as a child prodigy, a Black child prodigy, being able to play classical music, which was something that it
Yeah.
was a shock for a Black person to be able to do. Just the depth and the meaning behind her lyrics.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow. And for me, it was just incredible to be able to research even more about her and just know more about her.
Yeah.
And then the other two women I spoke about was Solange Knowles, and I talked
Yes.
about Janelle Monáe. The reason why I talked about Solange is, in particular, one of the songs I mentioned was "Don't Touch My Hair." You know,
Yes.
and just I kind of wanted to paint a picture, literary wise, as just a woman who was making a political statement, not in
Yeah.
an aggressive way, but in a, this is my stance,
Mm-hmm.
accept it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like, because, you know, as a Black woman, it resonated with me, you know, don't touch
Yeah.
my hair, because, you know, wear your hair in afro, go to work, and you have like switch up styles. Like, these are things that we as women think about, like, are they going to comment on my hair? Are they going to comment on my hair? Are they going to ask if
Yeah.
my hair is real? That kind of thing. And so she really brought to light just that kind of conversation and that dialogue.
Yeah.
Black women tend to
Yeah.
either are used to,
Deal with.
accustomed to, or have to endure, you know? So
Yeah.
I had to bring her in. But also I wanted to talk about Janelle Monáe, because in her music career, she's kind of, I don't want to like paint them as two, but for no better kind of parallel and analogy,
Yeah.
she's like the Octavia Butler in music.
Music,
Why do I say
absolutely.
that? Because she's, you know, especially earlier on in her career as well, she created a whole new world.
Yeah.
Literally
a whole new world for Cindy Mayweather to live in.
Literally. So
Yeah.
analysing Janelle Monáe as Janelle Monáe and Janelle Monáe as Cindy, like, it was just like, I had to talk about this. And just in her songs, there's always messages behind that, and always just about liberating the woman. So I just thought that was obvious choice to talk about when it comes to outlaw, because some outlaw women, it's like, I'm going against the grain in my world. Other outlaw women, it's like, I'm not even going to acknowledge this world, I'm just going to create my own. You know, and so I really wanted to play with that.
Those complexities, I love that, honestly. You were blessed. You blessed yourself with that topic and question.
We thank God.
Honestly, to be quite honest, you've really given us so much food for thought and so much knowledge. Like, there wasn't a more perfect person to get on this episode to talk about these things, and the range, because we went from Solange, we had the Bible, we've had self-help books, we've had Ralph Ellison, we've had Shakespeare, we've had Joseph Conrad, we've had, you know, we've been there, we've been here, there and everywhere. So I just want to say thank you firstly so much.
Thank you.
We have to tell the viewers, disclaimer for all the people in the audience, we have recorded this episode already. This is our second time. I was trying so hard to not like ask questions that of things we've already spoken about in the last episode. I would say this episode is going to be a million times better. The first one was great, but it will only live in our memories because there is no record of it. Literally. I went to edit the episodes and the files just didn't exist. So we had to re-record, and it's kind of an 11th hour. We're going to get this podcast out regardless. So I'm just extra grateful because Orisha didn't just record once, she recorded twice. We're here again. So thank you so much. Just before you go, please tell us where we can find you social media wise, and the Readers Collection, because I know that if people haven't already found you, they're going to be thinking, drop the socials, what's the app? Tell us.
So my personal, you might as well, Orisha.nia. On the page, the Readers Collection, it's at the Readers Collection. So all lowercase, no spaces, no dots, nothing, just at the Readers Collection. I've made it easy for you guys. Literally.
There we go. So at Orisha.nia and then at the Readers Collection, if you would like to just know more about books and reading. And if you're listening and you're like, I'm listening to a podcast because I don't read, there's a reason I don't read. And I know some of you have said that to me. You're like, I really like your podcast because I don't read. I'm not here to force you to read because you all have different reasons for not wanting to read. But I would say, I would urge you, I would encourage you very gently to go and look at that page, because if I wasn't a reader, that page would make me want to be a reader. And the fact that I am a reader, that page makes me want to be a better reader, a more efficient reader, a more effective reader. So I am so grateful, Orisha, for you being on this podcast today. Thank you for all your knowledge, all your gems, all your wisdom. If you have any more questions, you can always ask Orisha. You have her socials, or you can leave them in the comments on our posts on Instagram. A reminder, if you don't follow us on Instagram, you won't know this, but episodes are now on YouTube. We are uploading like the back catalogue, so we're going to start from episode 1 and 2 on 4 a week, so 2 on a Tuesday and 2 on a Saturday, until I hope we get to like the end of March, and then we're up to date with the back catalogue, and then we'll start uploading with the episode that we record for a Monday. Because I just felt like YouTube is a little bit more accessible for some people. I know people that don't have Spotify that have been like, I really want to listen, and so they can do that now. Maybe it'll be more shareable, and it will make its rounds around the internet a little bit more, which I hope it will do. So please subscribe to the channel, like the videos, watch them on there, listen on Spotify, Apple, Google, it's up to you. Follow us we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. And have a wonderful day, and thank you all for tuning in to this kind of little mini series on African American history and today literature. Thank you so much, and thank you, Orisha.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye everyone. Bye.